For me, honestly, whenever I drink wine with my friends and I see someone get this look like, wow, I've never tasted this. I really like it. What is this? That makes me happy.
I'm your host, Brian McCann, and this is the Road to Wine Expert podcast. Wanda Mann is the embodiment of all things wine should be. Fun, happy, engaging, laid back, conversational, and loved by my mom. I have to laugh as I say the last one, but it's a funny little story. As you might expect, my mom was a huge fan of the Road to Wine Expert Summit, and having not heard of Wanda prior to my interview with her, my mom said that Wanda was someone that she wanted to have a glass with because of her personality and enthusiasm that's so infectious. As a result, I've played telephone between both of them, and actually it sounds like they're going to be getting together pretty soon, and their plans are pretty elaborate. It's going to be New York, Chicago, or Spain, of all things, so I'm pretty jealous. After this interview, I hope Wanda can become your friend too, and Wanda, I apologize if I inundate your social calendar with fans of the podcast and my mom.
Wow, that's always a tough question for me. I would say getting into it started probably when I was 16, and I had the chance to go and study in Barcelona for a year. And before I went away, my dad gave me a bottle of Georges de Boeuf Beaujolais Nouveau because he's like, look, I know you're going to be drinking wine in Spain and I don't want you going crazy. And I was like, if you think about it, that's the perfect bottle of wine to give a 16-year-old. It's fruity, it's fun, you don't really taste the alcohol. So that was kind of my entry. But I have to say, during that year I lived in Spain, I did drink a lot of wine with my host family. I did not have a particular involved interest in what I was drinking. I was like, oh, I'm 16 in Spain drinking wine, and that was good enough. So as an adult, I would say the transformative moment was about 7 or 8 years ago. I was randomly invited to a wine luncheon in New York to meet a winemaker, Danielle P. from Trapiche in Argentina. And I just really didn't know that world existed. Like, these winemakers would fly to New York and bring their wines and share them with you, and you just laugh and talk and have a great meal. And after that, I was hooked. So I slowly moved away from writing about fashion and beauty and events and found that more and more wine was where I wanted to be and changed my focus. So thank you, Danielle P., for being a catalyst for this.
Great. So we're kind of building the timeline, which is like, I love to do this with everyone I talk to. So was that the original model of Black Dress Traveler? It was sort of, you're writing about fashion and then it's evolved into wine? Okay.
It was a lifestyle blog with fashion, beauty, food, but not very much wine content at that time. So I was going to Fashion Week. I was reviewing mascaras and lipsticks. I love all of those things, but I have to be honest, I didn't really enjoy writing about them. So I enjoyed travel stories and then later on wine. Somehow I randomly got, invited to that first wine event, and then that became, more of a part of my life.
Let's jump back to the origins of Black Dress Traveler. How did you decide to start a blog, and where did that come from? Did you have experience in writing? Lead us to that epiphany moment where you're like, I'm going to go start this blog.
Yeah. I guess I've always been kind of a serial entrepreneur when it comes to the internet. So before I had Black Dress Traveler, I had a newsletter called Man About Town. It's my last name is Mann. And I used to send it out just to friends because my career was events planning. So producing large conferences, meetings, parties. So I always kind of had to know what was going on in New York City. So whenever friends were looking for a restaurant or what's the latest museum opening, they would write me. And finally I said, you know what? Don't write me. I'm just going to email you all once a week. So it started out as a list for a few friends, and it kind of grew and grew. And suddenly I had about, 15,000 subscribers, and I had advertisers, and it was fun. It was kind of just things that I thought were cool in New York City. Then after a few years, I got a little bored with that because I was like, I don't just want to write a list of events happening in the city. I like to have a little more creativity. And I was randomly invited on a press trip to Spring Lake, New Jersey, the Riviera, New Jersey. Spring Lake is a really beautiful town, actually. But that was my very first press trip, was to Spring Lake. And when I came back from that trip, I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, okay, it wasn't, Saint-Tropez, but they hosted me. I had beautiful meals. I stayed at this beautiful bed and breakfast. And I was like, I kind of need a brand for that, if I want to do this. So it came to me like 2 a.m. I'm known for loving dresses. Like a lot of women in New York, I wear a lot of black. And I was like, I'm the black dress traveler. And I ran it by a few friends who were like, that fits you, and it stands out. So that's how I came up with it.
That is a great origin story. Thank you for sharing it. I love the 2 a.m. epiphany. I interviewed Elliot Clark a couple weeks back. He is better known as the apartment bartender on Instagram. Yeah, he's so wonderful. I can't wait to share his interview with you. But he had a very similar story. It was 2 a.m. and I think he was just Elliot Clark before, or something to that effect. And he was making drinks at home, and his buddy was like, dude, you're the apartment bartender.
Exactly.
And they had a laugh about it. And then he woke up the next day after changing it, in a somewhat altered state. And then was like, you know what? That was actually one of those good ideas that happens late at night after a few. So
I think for all of us, especially working in the wine space, I think it's really important to come up with something that's memorable, but definitely captures who you are as a person. And I love to travel, and I kind of have an unhealthy addiction to dresses. So it all worked out well. And I say, wherever you go in the world, with the little black dress in your suitcase, you are ready for whatever comes your way. So there's a practical part to it as well.
Yeah, it's a great motto. It's a great motto. It's a great tagline. It's fitting for you. And it's nice that you found a brand. I think the cool thing too is hearing that it started out as a project that was really like you were getting too much inbound inquiry, and you're like, I just need to get these people off my radar so I can do everything else.
Exactly.
And then it was this slow evolution of email lists to blog. And so now that you've transitioned away from fashion, what does a day in the life of the black dress traveler look like?
Interesting. Well, I'm a native New Yorker, and I live in Manhattan. So I live a very kind of New York City lifestyle. What's great about working in wine in New York is the world comes to us, which I'm sure you experience in Chicago as well. The route seems to be New York, Chicago, Texas, California for the winemakers when they're visiting. So it's so great. So often, I would say 3 to 4 times a week, I'm at sit-down tastings, whether those are lunches or dinners with winemakers. If I'm lucky, often those are one-on-one meetings, which I really love because you really can delve into the topics that you want and really develop a rapport. Sometimes I'll go to the larger portfolio tastings. And then I often, at least once or twice a week, taste with my friends. So, it's really great to get samples at home, but I love to hear what my friends think, who aren't necessarily wine experts or wine geeks, just to get an honest reaction from people who actually go into wine shops. So just last night, for example, I met up with 3 friends. We opened up about 7 bottles to taste, just to get their input. And then sometimes I find time to write between going to all of those events. So I try to have at least 2 full days where I don't have any appointments that are writing days.
Great. Yeah, that's great. It was a nice snapshot of your week and sort of what you're up to. So you mentioned the wine expertise. I think you're my first, at least identified, certified wine specialist.
Okay.
So I would love for you to share how you went about obtaining that certification, and then we could get into some of the details of what it looks like, the commitment and things like that. So why did you decide to opt for the CWS?
I think for me, I don't think it's a requirement of the industry. And I definitely know SOMs who've been working at this for 20, 30 years who have no CSW, no WSET credentials, and they're full of knowledge. I think for me, just because I've always been a bit of a nerd and I find myself missing school, this opportunity to really sit down and do a self-study course and put together all of this different information. I mean, I'll be honest, in the beginning, when winemakers are throwing around terms like malolactic fermentation or, talking about, polyphenols and all of these things, I would kind of discreetly write them in my notebook and then go home and look these things up. And I was like, there has to be a better way. There has to be a course that I can do that will work with my schedule. So Society of Wine Educators, offers this option to study for the CSW. And I like the idea that it was self-study. You have a year from the time that you register to take the test. There is a weekly online study group, which was amazing, with an amazing instructor, Professor Jane, and she's fabulous. And it really helped to put all of these technical terms together. Also, you learn more geography than you ever will in your life. I mean, I've never been someone who was really adept with a map, but suddenly, you're looking at these maps and you're learning history. So even though CSW is not as advanced as having a WSET diploma, it really, for me, I felt gave me a stronger foundation. I felt more comfortable with technical terms, and it was just fun. It was just fun. So I recommend it. It's not a terribly expensive course. And over the course of a year, I would say, I'll be honest, I didn't start studying for it right away. I realized, oh my goodness, I paid for this and I have about 4 months before it expires. I better start studying. So I probably really cranked down and studied 3 to 4 months before I took the test, and probably studied about, depending on the week, 6 to 10 hours a week.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think there's a couple ways to go about learning wine, right? You can learn casually and continue to pick up facts and go through these tastings. And like you said, you're learning, you're hearing a new term, you're researching it, and you kind of build your knowledge that way. And then for me is when I set the goal personally to take the WSET2 and the introductory sommelier exam, like it just sort of changed my mentality. And also I gave myself a really short window because I just know that if I gave myself even 3-4 months, I would just wait until the last possible moment. So I gave myself 6 weeks just said, I said, let's go. And it was like, okay. And it was all about intensity. Actually had a great conversation with Yannick Benjamin. And he was saying he's like, he compared it to physical fitness. He's like, and so someone could be walking on the treadmill for an hour and be aloof and on their phone and feel like, oh, I did an hour of cardiovascular, where some person next to them could be running intervals for 10 minutes and they got a way better workout. So there's a lot of ways to go. And I think cramming it in for me, I'm actually surprised at how much knowledge I retained. I think the benefit is that I go work in a wine shop, so I have to kind of be aware of everything. Whereas if you don't have the context to recall the knowledge, it just sort of, I'm sure, diminishes.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yes, I encourage anyone. Look, it's not a requirement, but I think if people are curious, at least explore the intro WSET or CSW.
Yeah.
And especially if you want to write about wine, I really found for me, it just improved, my writing tremendously to be able to back up what I kind of intuitively was feeling about a wine, and to be able to back that up with solid information. Just that gave me more confidence.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think one of the things too is those introductory courses, especially I took WSET level 1, and it just gives you the vocabulary to be more comfortable with wine and just know the terms and sort of have this understanding, so that when you go talk to someone who's further along on their journey to wine expert, you still have like the base language.
Exactly.
And that's really important. I love, though, the idea of the self-study. I mean, WSET 1, you can do like an 8-hour classroom or 6 hour, something like that. It's one day. But for is it CSW?
It's CSW.
Okay, got it. So for the CSW, I love that idea of the once weekly, or the weekly online sort of classroom plus discussion. That sounds really helpful.
Yeah, that really helped because it is a lot of information, and the exam, at least when I took it, and I think it's the same, it's all distilled down to 100 questions that you have an hour to answer. And when you're talking about, the old world regions, new world, viticulture, geography, it's you just have no idea what those 100 questions will be. So, and the pass rate, I was surprised I passed it on the first go around, because I'd heard that a lot of people don't, because it was harder. There were some questions I was like, whoa, what? So it's not an easy exam by any means.
Do you have a desire to do any of the other certifications you think you're good for now? I'm sure it's one of those things too, where you after you've set the bar, right, you're getting education indirectly through all of your meetings.
I mean, I definitely have thought about at least going for the WSCT up to like level 3. But even finding the time to study for that, I just don't have it right now. And part of it is because, as you said, I'm kind of very immersed in doing this and learning as I go along. I never say to my readers that I am an authority, like I'm learning, I'm on this journey, and I want to share it with you so you feel empowered and have a little bit more information when you go out to dinner or you go to your local wine shop. So yeah, maybe at some point, if I take a little sabbatical, have a little more free time, I'd like to do it. But for now, I feel good. I feel like I'm in a good place.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's all anyone really wants, is just to feel good and comfortable. And then, you can let your learning take you from there. I always tell people at the beginning, it's so hard. Like you just have to hit the books, and finding the right book is really important, something that matches your learning style. And then it's just, at that point, in my mind, you've created the momentum of learning about wine, and things just sort of take care of themselves, right? So if you read a book, something in that book is going to strike you, whether it's a region or a varietal, or you're going to find maybe it's history or soil type. Something's going to really suck you in, and that'll probably be your next book or blog article, and then it'll just sort of go from there. So starting really is the hardest part, just getting that, because it's so overwhelming, right? When you begin.
It really is. But I think what's also nice that now that there are people like us, right, that so many more people are intrigued by this, and it's not some weird esoteric thing that's just for, very wealthy people, that, wine has really become more democratic, and that's the way it should be. So I like the fact that it's opening up, and there are all these ways to learn, whether it's, if you want to buy a book, if you want to take a course, if you want to go to tastings. I just love the momentum that's in the industry right now. So that's pretty cool. And I feel like that's just been the last few years. It's just been tremendous, the growth, young people, so much interest in wine. I love it.
The power of the internet and social media has allowed so many people to voice their opinions that couldn't before. And it's funny, like as much as wine is like propelled forward, there's still something like, I feel people still feel like they have to publish a book to like accomplish something in the industry, when it's like you could have a Instagram following of 30,000 people. Exactly. And that's way more influential than, going down the traditional path of creating a book. And by the time it goes to print, 80% of it is out of date.
Exactly. And, even with traditional blogging, I was talking to someone who loves wine. She's very knowledgeable. She's like, but I don't really consider myself a writer. I said, so you're not a writer. That shouldn't stop you. I said, you have 30,000 followers on Instagram. I said, you have an audience. You take beautiful photographs. I said, that's just as valid. I said, not everyone is going to write 500-word articles or 1,000-word articles. I said, so if that's not your comfort zone, don't feel you have to do that. Because like you said, the power of social media now, I mean, I find, and sometimes I even wonder, it's like, wow, I'm putting all of these hours into writing, these blog articles. I'll put something on Instagram and there's such instant gratification, with people liking it. But I love to write. So for me, you know, I will keep writing, but I do understand the power now of Instagram and Facebook and social media is, you know, at the same level and sometimes surpassing prose.
Sure. Well, it's just amazing to me how many people have built really large wine followings
Mhm.
on Instagram. And honestly, like, it's so funny because the majority of posts, if you probably like put them together in aggregate, are shots of wine bottles or like glasses of wine, which
It's true. We all
are
have the same.
yeah, and are like completely uninteresting,
Exactly.
right? Like as far as like subject matter, it's not really that beautiful. Like maybe sometimes it's a glass of wine and you're looking, you know, you're on a terrace looking over a beautiful view of a vineyard or something, and that's wonderful. But it's like it's just like a bottle shot, and I'm always amazed. And like, this is thousands of people liking it.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, but there is like a really vibrant Instagram wine culture
There
that
is.
is that
And I
is
came late to the Instagram party, but I have to say I love it. And I get really excited when I see those cliche bottle shots that we all have.
oh,
I really love it. So
it's incredibly addicting. You're looking at it and like, oh, what are they drinking? What is that? Where is that? Oh, do I have that here? And I think there's so much, I call it bottle envy,
yes.
right? It's part of it self-serving and you're like, haha, look what I'm drinking. And then other people are like, oh, I wish I could be drinking that. Or that's great.
Yeah, but it is fun.
So speaking of bottles, shots, and the glamour shots for Instagram, what have you been drinking lately? What's really exciting to you?
It has been the season of rosé, 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 rosé. Partially because, look, it is the season for it. We all know that rosé mania is a thing that will not be stopped. I've been flooded with samples of rosé, which is it's what my friend calls a princess problem. Like, oh, poor you, so much rosé. But you know what I do love rosé? I think I always find it's a category that people are willing to experiment with. That, you know, for novice wine drinkers who may say, well, I only drink, you know, Chianti or I only drink Malbec. When it comes to rosé, they're not as concerned with the varietal. So I find it's a great way to introduce my friends to new grapes that maybe they haven't tried as reds. And also for me, it's kind of a lighter expression of some of my favorite reds. So right now, for example, this rosé that I'm drinking is the Molinara grape, which used to be part of the Amarone blend and is slowly being phased out by most Amarone producers. They're just using Corvina Rondinella. So a lot of them just pulled up their Molinara grapes, but Bertani said, you know what, let's see if we can do something with this. And they're now making rosé with the Molinara because it has that lightness, that fruitiness, it's delicate, and it's really nice. So I like rosé. I think it's the playful category of wines. So I've had all kinds of rosés from every corner of the world. I also do love my champagne, I'm not gonna lie. So I've had a lot of really good champagnes lately, and you know, from smaller producers that maybe I was not as familiar with. Yes, I guess that's what I'm focused on right now. Refresh, cool wines.
Those are two great things. I love that idea of rosé as this gateway wine to grapes, because you're right. It's people just sort of blanket it as rosé, and they're not so concerned about what the grape is. You know, it's really, is it fresh and delicious, and then, you know, is it quaffable? Is it enjoyable? And then they're like, oh, what's in here? And they're like, and then you say like, oh, it's Grenache, or it's a Grenache place. And they're like, oh, I thought I hated Grenache, mate. It's a good eye opener too. Because the other thing is, if you tell someone like it's Grenache and it's red, and they're like, ugh, I don't like that. You know, they've got all that predisposition. But rosé, you're right. There's a lot of freedom and fun in that category.
I think it's yeah, I just think it's a great, like, you know, yesterday I had a lovely Syrah rosé from Israel.
Oh, cool.
I was like, this is really good. Had nice spice and body and like a little hint of like Mediterranean herbs, you know. So for me, I just love the category, you know, and I'm just having a blast tasting all of these rosés. But I do like a nice, you know, slightly chilled red this time of year as well. Like I'm happy with a good dry Lambrusco, and Pinot Noir, you can chill down a little bit this time of year is really nice. So that's good as well. But not, this isn't really Amarone season. We did have a nice Brunello last night that was quite tasty, but later in the night.
Yeah, it's tough to drink those big reds
It really
this time of year, especially with the heat. And I think that's why rosé is so fun.
Yeah.
Plus, rosé is just incredibly versatile and it's food friendly. It's perfect for a backyard barbecue, whether you just want to sip on it or if you want to enjoy it with like summer salads. I mean, it runs the gambit of whatever you want to eat. But champagne, right? Other point you made, not enough people are drinking champagne. And I'm talking about legit champagne, not sparkling wine, but
exactly.
It is one of life's true pleasures. It's so fun. I love it. I absolutely love it. I got hooked because we did a champagne tasting in the store. And
nice.
So we have all of these different distributors come in and they pour at this event and it's so much fun. But then prior to that, all of the distributors come in and taste us out on all the champagne. So like the entire month of December, I drank more champagne in that month than I had in my entire life.
Wow.
And it was wonderful. I got to try, stuff from like the Terry Thies portfolio and sort of these old classic examples, grower producers, and then the big house stuff as well. And it's just such an amazing region. I think it's having its renaissance. It's sort of had it already, but it's continuing. Like more and more people are drinking it. There's a few people who shop at the store who like are always like looking for the new bottle, or they get a bottle every couple weeks or so to sort of celebrate. And it's just like, why not? Like crack some champagne. That'll make it fun. If you're having a bad day, like
don't just save it for a special. I mean, champagne and French fries are so good together. Like anything salty, crunchy, like just goes so well with champagne. So I think people are missing out when they just save it for a toast as opposed to integrating it with whatever they're already, doing or eating, because it tends to work well with a lot of things. I went to a dinner with the winemaker from Piper Heidsieck about a year ago, and we went to an Indian restaurant and we drank the Piper Rare Rosé throughout the entire meal. And even he was surprised at how beautifully the rosé worked with, these creamy curries and these spicy foods. And I mean, it just was seamless throughout the meal, this rare rosé champagne. So I was like, this goes to show, you can do this. It doesn't have to be a Michelin star Indian restaurant. You can do this with your takeout place, at home, and just get a nice bottle of bubbles. So yeah.
And especially if you do it that way, right? So you're saving a couple bucks on your meal because you're just getting, some great, like a lot of ethnic food, Thai, Indian, anything with a really great amount of spice can really do well with champagne, especially some of even the sweeter champagnes, because then you got a little bit of that residual sugar in there would help cool down some of the heat. It can be so fun. So if you're saving some money and you're doing takeout or BYOB, a lot of those places tend to be BYOB. Yeah, go get a nice bottle of bubbles and have a great night.
Yeah, it's true. I was on a date a few years ago with a guy who ordered white Zinfandel, and I was like, oh boy, I don't think this is going to work. So there was like the devil wanted to say, oh, just go to the bathroom and don't go back to the table. Then there was a little angel saying, no, be nice, and maybe this is a teachable moment. So I decided to make it a teachable moment. But you know what? He still likes white Zinfandel.
Some people, I have a saying, and mine is, if you drink wine, you are my friend.
Yeah.
But I might want to put an asterisk in there, unless it's white Zinfandel.
Like if you're drinking it ironically, or you're like, okay, I know it's not the best, but I have this attachment to it. It's this. But he's like, it's as good as anything else.
Yeah, that's tough, right?
That was a tough one. Needless to say, it was not a love connection. Some things are deal breakers.
You've got to have those non-negotiables, right?
That is a non-negotiable. He also liked apple martinis and cosmopolitans. He had a very Sex in the City palate. in terms of his drinking. So I wish him well.
Oh, that's wonderful. I don't know if that'll make the final cut, but that is so fun. That is so fun to just hear that. Oh, I love it. Well, that was a great story, and it's cool to hear you're enjoying all these wines. You said you had a great Brunello the other night. Do you have like a recent memory of like the last like really great bottle or glass of wine that you've had?
I would have to say, and so much of what makes a bottle great is not just the wine, but where you are and who you're drinking it with, right?
Sure.
So a 1967 Britannia Amarone, drinking it in Valpolicella, with the winemaker. I mean, it doesn't get better than that, so I think that memory will always stick with me. But for me, honestly, whenever I drink wine with my friends and I see someone get this look like, wow, I've never tasted this. I really like it. What is this? That makes me happy because I have those moments. And so it's nice to see that reflected in someone else. So I would say I have those moments several times a week, just drinking wine and seeing how it brings out the kid really in all of us. I feel like there's so many things that we're jaded about. And as adults, we're kind of taught to hold in, showing too much excitement about things. But I find that wine people, when we drink something that really moves us, it's like that little kid spirit comes out. And so I enjoy that there's something in my life that gives me that feeling.
Well said. Well said. I think that is just a wonderful way to end it all. So Wanda, thank you so much for your time today. That was so great. But before I, officially let you go, what's the best way people can learn about you, Black Dress Traveler, and, follow your adventures? Where can they find you and connect?
Well, they can find my blog at blackdresstraveler.com, and that's also my Facebook page. And I have a pretty interactive group of Facebook followers, but I'm also on Instagram as Wine Dine Wanda, and also on Twitter, but I have to say I'm not as active on Twitter, but I do love hearing from people on Instagram and Facebook.
I had the absolute pleasure to catch up with Wanda recently, and you can find our conversation on the blog at roadtowineexpert.com/Wanda-Mann. That's MANN. And you've got to love people with two N's in their last name. Thanks, Wanda, for all you do. Always love following you on Instagram, and I'm looking forward to all the content that you create in the future. Also, thanks to my podcast manager, Talia Goodman, for pushing me to publish, reminding me of deadlines, and making the podcast a priority. Thanks to Domain for sponsoring this episode of The Road to Wine Expert. Domain is the nation's largest network of wine storage facilities, but they don't just store wine. They can help you in every step of your journey as a wine collector. That means shipping, receiving, importing, organizing, selling, storing, and protecting. Speaking of protecting, Domain offers two amazing storage products, Domain cardboard boxes and VineBox, a stackable, flexible wine storage solution. For more information on both those products, you can go to domainstorage.com. They're also available for purchase on Amazon. And finally, thanks to all the musicians who allowed their music to be featured on this podcast by sharing it through the Creative Commons license. If you'd like to know more about these artists and where you can find their amazing music, you can go to roadtowineexpert.com/music. And if you're still here, there's a couple things that you can do to support the podcast. The first of which is visiting roadtowineexpert.com and signing up to receive our emails. That'll keep you in touch about what is happening on both the show and the blog. Also, leave us a review on your platform of choice. It's a great way to say thank you and help us discover more and more people and get on the trending lists and all that jazz. So your review is much appreciated. And last but not least, if you've got questions, comments, concerns, or just looking for advice in general, reach out to me at brian@roadtowineexpert.com. That's BRIAN @roadtowineexpert.com.